Hey guys, today we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday in regards to photosynthesis. So I want you to get out the piece of paper that I gave you yesterday, and you had written down the word photosynthesis and the formula. So if you will get that out, and I also need you to get out some colored pencils or crayons, markers, whichever you need. You're welcome to use the stuff that's in the student closet if you need to. And so if you'll pause the video now and you guys get set up with your paper and then also with something to draw with. Okay, so if you're ready, we'll get started. Yesterday we talked about that photosynthesis could be divided up into two parts. Photo means light. Synthesis means to make. So what we're going to do in the process of photosynthesis is we are going to use light to make something. So specifically, what we are going to do, and if you'll get a different color to write this in, we are going to use light, which is also known as solar energy. We're going to use light or solar energy to make what is called cellular. Pen's not want to work. There we go. Or chemical energy. Also known as food. So photosynthesis is how autotrophs or plants make food. Okay, so I gave you a formula yesterday to use as well, and it seems a little complicated, but it's really not. It's things that you guys already know. It was 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O in the presence of sunlight yields C6H12O6 plus 6 O2. So what we do is we take the things that we know that plants need. We know that they've got to take in carbon dioxide. We know that they've got to have water. And we know that they've got to be present in sunlight in order for plants to live. So you start off by taking the things that you know plants need. And they are going to make the things that you know that we need. We need food. And in this case, it's in the form of glucose or sugar. And we also need oxygen. So what we're going to do, I'm not going to have room to do that, do this here on my board. It's a little small. But on your paper, underneath your formula there, we are going to draw a picture of exactly what's going on in photosynthesis. Now, we're not going to get quite as detailed as we will in AP biology, for example. But we are going to get more detailed than probably we were in life science, okay? So if you will, we're going to draw, like I said, we're going to draw this picture on the bottom underneath where we have your formula. Okay, so we've already talked about that photosynthesis happens inside the cell in a structure called the chloroplast. So what I would like for you to do is to get a green, and I want you to draw a large oval on the bottom part of your paper. And that is not the best oval, so maybe yours looks a little better than mine. Draw a large oval there underneath your formula. Okay, now what this is our chloroplast. So I want you to label that as chloroplast. Okay, so we can label it over here. It looks like it over there on the right. You couldn't see it. Okay, so photosynthesis occurs in two parts, okay? It's going to occur in the photo part and in the synthesis part, okay? So what I want you to do first is over here on this side, on the left, I want you to label this as photo. We're going to put, oops. Step 1 is photo, okay? So if you'll label this part as photo. And over here, the second part of photosynthesis is going to be the synthesis part. Good grief. Okay, finally I got it. Okay, maybe nobody had a seizure while I was going back and forth. But anyway. Okay, so photo we know means light. So that goes ahead and tells us that something about this first part in photosynthesis is going to be using light in some way. Okay, so this part actually has a name. And the photo part, the first step here, is often called a light-dependent reaction. Okay, so this part we say is light-dependent. Okay, so that means it has to have light in order to work. The synthesis part is not going to be light-dependent. It is not going to require light, actually, for it to occur. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the photo part. And it's a little difficult for me because with working with the stylus and the small size of the iPad, to be able to draw both of these on here. So what I want you guys to do is divide your chloroplast in half. You're going to use the right half for the synthesis part. You're going to use the left half for the light dependent or the photo part, the first step. So I'm going to clear this out and come back and draw the second step later. But I may need to use all of this space in order to draw the first part, okay? So the first thing I want to do is make you aware of the structure of a chloroplast. Okay, so we know that it's kind of an oval shape, and inside of it there are stacks of things that look like little cookies. Okay, so if you'll draw those. We're going to draw a couple of these, a couple of stacks. You can also use a green to do that. Now, these stacks are called grana. Okay, so that is spelled Grana. And these are stacks. Okay. So the whole entire stack is called a grana. But one of these, individually, one of these little discs is called a thylakoid. Not sure if you can tell what I'm spelling, so I'm going to spell it for you. That is Thylakoid. And that is one of these inside this stack. So a stack of thylakoids is called grana. And the individual disc itself is called a thylakoid. All right, now the thylakoids are full of a pigment. And I wonder if you know what this pigment's name is. It is a green pigment called chlorophyll. Okay, chloro, PHYLL, which is one of our prefixes. Okay, so the thylakoids are full of a pigment called chlorophyll. All right, and these chlorophyll absorb rays of light. And they absorb those rays of light from the sun. Okay, so we know that we are in a photo reaction, a light-dependent reaction. So we're going to need sunlight in some way. So I want you to go ahead and draw your sun. Okay, so here's our sunlight up here. Okay, now interestingly enough, and you probably learned this in physical science and life science, the colors that we do not absorb, the colors that we reflect, are the colors that we see. So chlorophyll is green, which is why we're drawing this in the green color. That is because plants actually don't use the green pigment, the green light. They actually reflect the green light. That light is reflected back towards our eyes, which is what makes plants look green. They actually use two wavelengths of light, neither of which are green, and those wavelengths are red and blue. So inside your sun, I want you to write the words red and blue, to remind you that it's the red and blue rays of light that are actually being used in this process, in this first process, in the photo part. Okay? So now we have our grana, which are a stack of thylakoids. We have our thylakoids there full of chlorophyll. There is another part of the chloroplast. All of this fluid that is surrounding the thylakoid membranes. And these membranes, they'll actually extend out to this part too. Okay, I just didn't draw on there because we're going to try to fit your second section of synthesis there. If I can get it in, I'll just draw it there. But out here in between all the thylakoids, in between all of the grana stacks, is liquid. And this liquid is called stroma. Okay, so this is just the liquid, the fluid that is surrounding the thylakoids. Okay, so that is also present as well. All right, so what's going to happen is our sunlight comes into the chloroplast. It is going to hit these thylakoids. Okay, so the sunlight comes in, these red and blue rays are absorbed here. They're going to hit the thylakoids. They are also going to hit the stroma. And the stroma is full of water. Okay, so the sunlight is going to hit water in the stroma. It also hits the thylakoids. Okay? Well, what happens to the water is the water actually splits. The hydrogen and the electrons are going to split away from the oxygen. Now, you're going to have more than one molecule of water that is being split at one time. So what is actually going to happen is oxygens are going to leave. Okay? They're going to leave the chloroplast. All right, now I want you to look up at your waste product in your formula. What is one of the things that we make from photosynthesis? Oxygen. Here's where that comes in. We're taking, sunlight's coming in, it splits the water, and there's, like I said, there's multiple molecules of water that's happening to. The oxygen groups together in units of 2, and leaves. The plant says we don't need the oxygen, so it just gets rid of it actually as waste. Now you still have the hydrogens and some electrons left from the water, okay, because only the oxygen left. They are actually going to go here to the thylakoid. They get transferred there into a structure that is on the membrane of the thylakoid called the electron transport chain. The electron transport chain. And so what happens is you have these hydrogens and these electrons coming, and they're being transported on the membrane of the thylakoids through this electron transport chain. And by stimulating all these electrons, what you wind up doing is creating some ATP. All right, and we know that ATP is energy. So what comes out of the electron transport chain will make us a little blast here, okay? And I know that looks horrible, but anyway. We're going to make ATP and something called NADPH, which is also an energy-carrying molecule. Okay, so in the photo or the light-dependent reaction, what we did is we took sunlight and we made ATP and NADPH, and we also gave off some oxygen. Okay? Now, on the second half, the right half of your chloroplast, hopefully you've left that open, we're going to complete the synthesis part. Because the purpose of photosynthesis is not to make ATP. What are we trying to make? We're trying to make cellular or chemical energy in the form of food. We need to make glucose. So we're not interested in making ATP right now. But in the first step of this, we had to make ATP because it's going to require a lot of energy to do the second step, the synthesis. So we needed light to help us make energy so that we can do the work, the making, the synthesis part so that we can make the glucose. Okay, so I redrew my stuff because I told you I didn't have enough room on this little iPad to be able to draw in the synthesis stage. So I want you to do this on the right side of your chloroplast. So synthesis is actually not light dependent. It is called light independent. It is a light independent reaction, meaning that this doesn't require light to happen. We had to have light in order to make the ATP. But now we've got the energy we need to make this part of the cycle work. So this is the light independent reaction. It also has another name after the guy that discovered it. And his last name was Calvin. So for that reason, it is also called the Calvin cycle at times. Okay? So we just said that at the end, at the end of the first part, that photo part, we drew your little blast there, and you had made ATP and NADPH, okay? So this is where that comes in. All right, we're actually going to use it to power the synthesis part. Okay, so what we've got going on, first of all, is we have, and I'm going to draw this in a little cloud to symbolize that it's a gas. We have CO2. We know that plants use CO2. They use carbon dioxide. It comes in through the stomata. And stomata are openings in the leaves. Okay, so the CO2 gas comes in through the stomata. The oxygen also escapes through the stomata. So you've got oxygen leaving, carbon dioxide coming in. And so the carbon dioxide is going to come into the stroma. Remember, the stroma is our liquid, our water, okay? So it just comes in and is in the fluid outside the thylakoid. So the synthesis part doesn't take place in the thylakoid. The synthesis part takes place in the stroma, in the water. So what you've got is, let's say that you have a couple of carbon dioxides coming in here. So let's draw a carbon. Okay, just draw a little circle, put a little C in there to represent that that is a carbon coming in from your carbon dioxide. Now, inside the stroma, something that is left there all the time, we actually use the carbon dioxides that are left over from making glucose to make more of these. We have 5 carbon chains called RUBP. That is not quite so important right now, as long as you know that they are 5 carbon chains. So I want you to draw 5 carbons stuck together. And these are floating around in the stroma all the time. Like I said, we use carbon dioxide that's left over from making our glucose to make more RUBP, or these 5 carbon chains. Okay? And what we want to do is we want to add our carbon from our carbon dioxide to these other 5 carbons that are already there. But that is going to require some energy. We can't just stick it on there without having energy to do that. So we want to add it together. But in order to do that, we need energy. And the energy of the cell is ATP. That's why we needed to go ahead and make some ATP, so that this could happen. So you're going to have ATP work here, and you're going to have some ATP work in there in order to stick these together in a 6-carbon molecule. Okay, so what you wind up getting is 6 carbons all stuck together. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and those are all carbons. And then you've got another one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and we're just drawing a couple. There's lots of these that go on at the same time. Okay, but we're just drawing a couple for right now. Okay, for simplicity. Okay, now here's something interesting that happens. They don't want all these 6 carbons staying together. We're going to be making glucose, which is C6H12O6. So it's got 6 carbons in it. But the chloroplast does not want them in a 6-carbon chain. It actually wants them in 2 groups of 3. So we added the carbon to the unit of 5 to make 6. But now what's going to happen is energy is going to come in here, and energy is going to come in here, and actually break them in half. So you are going to wind up with 3 carbons and 3 carbons from the first chain. And then you're going to wind up with 3 carbons and 3 carbons from the second chain. And you may ask, why is it that way? I don't know. It just is. So we're going to accept that that's the way it is. But that is how it works. And you need ATP to break those up into 3 each. So what we're going to do then is you're going to use 6 of these to go make glucose. Okay? And then these 6 actually wind up getting recycled, and they get used again to go make these 5 carbon chains, RUBP again. That'll join with some more carbon dioxide, okay, the carbon from it, and then they will be used to create glucose. And then the cycle continues. What's left over gets recycled back to make RUBP and join with carbon that's coming in through the stomata, and then make glucose again. Okay? So the first part is photo. It uses light in order to give off oxygen as a waste in order to make ATP so that it can fuel or provide energy for the synthesis part, the Calvin cycle, the light independent reaction, which is going to take in carbon dioxide and is going to create glucose.